My God, what have we done?
If someone told me that a devoted Reverend sister, one who had taken sacred vows of purity and obedience, could fall into the deepest pit of temptation, I would have never believed it. But it happened. To me. I was a woman of faith, a servant of God, untouched by the distractions of the world. I had given everything to my calling. My days were spent in prayer, my heart at peace until he came into my life. Reverend Father Damien. A man of power. A man of influence. A man whose voice could shake an entire congregation, and whose eyes could make a woman forget the world. I never saw it coming. What started as harmless conversations turned into whispered secrets in the chapel, stolen glances across the altar, and emotions I wasn't supposed to feel. And then, one night, I crossed the line. What happened next will leave you speechless. Before we begin this gripping tale, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Kindly know your subscription, like, comment, and share on this channel means a lot to me as a creator. It gives me drive to generate more interesting and teachable stories. Don't forget to like, share this video and comment where you are watching from. My name is Sister Maria, and I once believed that my purpose in life was clear: to serve God with all my heart, mind, and soul. From the moment I stepped into the convent, I felt at peace, as though I had finally found my true home. The walls of the convent weren't just physical structures, they were a sanctuary, shielding me from the distractions and temptations of the outside world. I had always been deeply spiritual, drawn to the idea of dedicating my life solely to God. Growing up in a devout Catholic family, I was taught that a life of service was the highest calling. I admired the nuns who visited our parish, their serene expressions and unwavering devotion inspiring me. While other girls my age dreamed of marriage and children, I dreamt of wearing the habit, of spending my days in prayer and service. The moment I took my vows, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. I belonged here. My days were structured: early morning prayers, community service, daily mass, and quiet reflection. It was a life of simplicity, discipline, and purity. The outside world faded away, and I embraced the stillness. I was at peace, or at least I thought I was. And then, I met Reverend Father Damien. He was unlike any priest I had ever known. Confident, eloquent, charismatic. The moment he stepped onto the altar to deliver his sermons, the entire congregation hung onto his every word. He spoke with such conviction that it felt as though he could see into our souls. His voice was deep and commanding, yet gentle enough to soothe the most troubled hearts. Even the most hardened sinners seemed to soften under his gaze. I admired him, as did everyone else. He wasn't just a priest, he was a leader, a shepherd guiding his flock. He had a way of making people feel seen, as though their struggles mattered. And when he spoke to me, I felt special, chosen. At first, our conversations were strictly about faith and spiritual growth. He recognized my dedication and often commended me for my passion. "Maria, you have a strong spirit," he would say, his eyes warm with encouragement. "Your devotion is rare. Never lose that." I held on to those words. I had never sought recognition, but hearing them from him made me feel valued in a way I couldn't quite explain. But something changed. At first, it was subtle, just fleeting moments that seemed innocent. A lingering gaze during Mass, a slight hesitation before releasing my hand after a handshake, the way his voice softened when he spoke my name. I dismissed it. It was nothing. Perhaps it was merely admiration, a deep respect for a man of God. I had always admired priests, after all. But with Father Damien, it felt different. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way his robes fit snugly over his broad shoulders. The way his eyes darkened when he was deep in thought. The way his laughter, though rare, felt like a secret only a few were privileged to witness. And then, there was the way he looked at me. Not in the way a priest should look at a nun. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. I was overthinking, reading too much into harmless gestures. But my heart betrayed me. Whenever he entered the room, my breath hitched. When he spoke, I hung on to every word, not because of the wisdom in them, but because it was his voice. And when our eyes met across the chapel, I felt something I had never felt before. something dangerous. The inner conflict was unbearable. I had dedicated my life to God. I had taken vows, sacred, unbreakable vows. My faith was unshakable, my purpose clear. So why was my heart betraying me? Was this a test? A trial sent by God to challenge my devotion? If so, why did it feel so real? So undeniable? I prayed harder than ever before, begging for clarity, for strength. But even as I knelt before the altar, my mind was filled with images of him. One evening, everything shifted. It was a rainy night, the sound of droplets tapping against the stained glass windows as I sat in the church library, engrossed in scripture. The room was dimly lit, the flickering candlelight casting shadows along the ancient walls. I had come here to escape my thoughts, to immerse myself in God's word and silence the war within me. And then, I heard his voice. Maria. I looked up, my heart leaping into my throat. He stood in the doorway, his robes slightly damp from the rain, his expression unreadable. Father Damien, I greeted, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped inside, closing the heavy wooden door behind him. I didn't expect anyone to be here this late. I needed some time, I admitted, averting my gaze. He nodded, walking toward the bookshelf. Solitude can be good for the soul. A heavy silence settled between us, filled only by the crackling of the candles. I could feel his presence, too close yet not close enough. Then, it happened. As he reached for a book, his hand brushed against mine. It was the lightest touch, a mere whisper of skin against skin. And yet, it felt like fire. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The air grew thick, charged with something neither of us wanted to name. His fingers lingered for a second too long before he pulled away, clearing his throat. I should go, he murmured, though he made no move to leave. I nodded, but my heart screamed at me to stay. When he finally stepped away, my entire body trembled. The line had been crossed. No words were spoken, no confessions made, but in that moment, we both knew. Something had begun, and there was no turning back. I tried to ignore my feelings. I fasted. I prayed. I spent hours kneeling before the altar, whispering desperate pleas for strength. But the more I begged God to take away my emotions, the stronger they became. Father Damien consumed my thoughts. At first, I convinced myself it was harmless. Admiration. Respect. A deep spiritual connection. That was all it was, wasn't it? But admiration shouldn't make my heart race whenever he was near. Respect shouldn't make me crave his presence more than I craved my own solitude with God. And the worst part, I wasn't alone in this. I noticed the way he looked at me, the way his eyes softened when they met mine, the way his voice lowered when he spoke to me, as though the words he uttered were meant only for my ears. I told myself I was imagining things, but then came the small gestures. Little things that wouldn't mean much to anyone else but made my pulse quicken. When we stood in a group, his eyes always found mine first. When I spoke, he listened with an intensity that made me feel like my words mattered. When he passed by, his fingers would barely graze my hand, a fleeting touch, but one that sent shivers through me. I tried to pull away, to keep my distance, but he wouldn't allow it. Maria, you have such a pure heart, he told me one evening after a church meeting. His voice was gentle, but there was something else beneath it, something heavier, something I wasn't supposed to recognize. A chill ran through me. I felt confused. Was this admiration or something deeper? Was I misunderstanding him? Or was I seeing exactly what he wanted me to see? I wanted to believe that I was reading too much into things. That he was just being kind, that I was mistaking his warmth for something more. But in my heart, I knew I was lying to myself. And then came the moment I could no longer deny. It was a rainy evening. The sky wept as I knelt in the dimly lit chapel, lighting candles one by one. The scent of burning wax filled the air, mixing with the dampness that drifted in through the open doors. I had come here for peace, to escape my own thoughts. The flickering candlelight danced along the marble walls, casting shadows that seemed almost alive. And then, I heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Intentional. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Father Damien. He walked in without a word, his presence filling the chapel like an unspoken prayer. The sound of the rain outside faded as he stepped closer. I swallowed hard, keeping my eyes on the flames before me. "Father Damien," I greeted softly. "Maria." His voice was lower than usual. I forced a smile, but my hands trembled. "It's late. I didn't expect anyone else to be here." He sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "Neither did I. But sometimes, the silence calls us, doesn't it?" I nodded, unsure of what to say. Unsure of why I suddenly felt so vulnerable. He stood beside me, watching the flames flicker. A long silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. And then, he asked a question that changed everything. "Do you ever feel lonely?" The words caught me off guard. I turned to look at him, my heart hammering in my chest. His eyes weren't on the candles anymore. They were on me. Lonely. Did I feel lonely? I wanted to lie. To say no, to pretend that I had found all the fulfillment I needed within the walls of the convent. But the truth clawed at my throat. "Yes," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. His gaze darkened. There was something unreadable in his expression, something raw. "Me too," he murmured. The air between us shifted. My breath hitched as he reached out, his fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. The touch was featherlight, but it burned. "Father," my voice faltered. I should have stepped back. I should have run. But I didn't. I couldn't. His fingers lingered against my skin for a moment too long. Then, without warning, his hand cupped my cheek. I knew what was coming. I should have stopped it. I should have turned away. But when he leaned in, his lips capturing mine in a soft, forbidden kiss, my body betrayed me. For one stolen moment, I let it happen. The world vanished. There were no vows. No rules. No guilt. Only warmth. Only him. But reality came crashing down just as quickly as the moment began. I jerked back. The sound of my own breath filled my ears, ragged and panicked. What had I done? My hands trembled as I touched my lips, the taste of his still lingering there. I looked at him, eyes wide with horror, expecting to see regret in his face. But there was none. Only longing. Only the quiet confession of a man who had crossed the same forbidden line as I had. "Maria," he started, his voice heavy with emotion. But I couldn't stay. I turned and ran, my heart pounding against my ribs like a desperate prayer. Back in my room, I collapsed to my knees, my hands clutching at my habit as though it could somehow erase what had just happened. I had crossed the line. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sworn to uphold, it was all crumbling. Tears burned in my eyes as I rocked back and forth, whispering frantic prayers. "God, forgive me." But even as I prayed, I knew the truth. This wasn't over. The seed had already been planted. And temptation had only just begun. I avoided him for weeks. After that night in the chapel, I threw myself into prayer and penance, hoping to cleanse my soul of the sin I had committed. I fasted, denying myself food as if starving my body could kill the desires that had taken root inside me. I woke up before dawn and knelt before the altar for hours, whispering desperate prayers. "God, forgive me. Erase this weakness from my heart. Make me pure again." But no matter how hard I prayed, the memory of his lips on mine haunted me. I could still feel the warmth of his hand against my skin, the weight of his gaze when he had whispered my name. It was a poison that refused to leave my veins. And worst of all, he didn't let me go. Father Damien was relentless. I tried to avoid him, slipping away whenever he entered a room, finding excuses to leave before our paths could cross. But he always found a way to be near me. During Mass, his voice seemed to call out to me alone. During meals, his eyes lingered on mine a second too long. During prayer meetings, he sat close enough that I could feel his presence like a silent confession. One evening, I went to the confessional, hoping that speaking my sin aloud would somehow absolve me of it. I expected an elderly priest, someone who would remind me of God's mercy and demand I repent. Instead, it was him. I knew it the moment he spoke. "We are only human," he whispered from the other side of the wooden partition. "You don't have to carry this guilt alone." Maria. I froze, my hands trembling where they rested in my lap. This is wrong, I choked out. There is no right or wrong when it comes to the matters of the heart, he countered. His voice was calm, soothing, filled with the same power he used to sway entire congregations. But wasn't that what scared me the most? He was persuasive. He made sin sound like something divine. And I was weak. Despite all my prayers, despite all my penance, I allowed myself to fall again. What began as a moment of weakness became something unstoppable. Secret meetings in the chapel. He would find me when no one else was around, whispering words that made my heart ache and my resolve crumble. Stolen touches in the corridors. A brush of fingers, a hand on my waist as he passed by. Each time, my body betrayed me, leaning into him before my mind could remind me of who we were. Whispered confessions of emotions neither of us could control. I can't stop thinking about you, he admitted one night, his forehead pressed against mine in the dim candlelight. I should have fought harder. I should have walked away. But I was convinced it was love. I told myself that he cared for me. That what we had wasn't just sin but something deeper, something real. But deep down, I wondered, was I being manipulated? He knew the power he had over people. He knew how to use words to bend emotions, to make even the most forbidden desires seem like something righteous. And I had given myself to him. Then came the moment that shattered everything. I woke up one morning feeling off. At first, I ignored it. Fatigue was common. The convent life was demanding, with early morning prayers and long hours of work. But the nausea was impossible to ignore. At first, I assumed it was the fasting, maybe I had weakened myself too much. But as the days passed, the truth began to settle in the pit of my stomach like a heavy stone. I missed my period. Panic gripped me. This couldn't be happening. Not to me. I counted the days over and over again, convincing myself that I had miscalculated. That it was stress. That it was anything but what I feared the most. But the sickness wouldn't go away. One afternoon, when I was sure no one would see me, I sneaked out and found a small pharmacy outside the convent walls. With shaking hands, I bought a pregnancy test. The walk back was a blur. My heartbeat was too loud, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Back in my tiny room, I locked the door and took the test. I sat on the floor, staring at the positive result, my breath caught somewhere between a sob and a scream. Pregnant. I was pregnant. A Reverend sister carrying a child. I pressed a hand against my stomach, numb and shaking. I had known what we were doing was wrong, but I had never imagined this. How would I hide it? How would I explain it? What would happen to me? To my faith? To my reputation? I wanted to run. To disappear. To erase the past and start over. But it was too late. The proof of my sin was growing inside me, and there was no way to make it go away. I couldn't face him immediately. For days, I walked around in a daze, unable to focus on prayers, unable to eat, unable to sleep. But I couldn't hide it forever. When I finally told him, I expected shock. Fear. Maybe even anger. Instead, he went pale but remained calm. We will figure this out, he said. Figure what out? I stared at him, searching for something, regret, sorrow, guilt. Anything to show me that he understood the weight of what we had done. But there was none. He paced the room, rubbing his forehead. No one can find out, Maria. The words sent a chill down my spine. I was carrying his child. A life that was growing inside me, a life that neither of us had planned for. And yet, the first thing he thought about was secrecy. Do you understand what this means? I whispered. His jaw tightened. Yes. And that's why we need to be careful. Careful. He was thinking about himself. Not me. Not the child. Just himself. I had always believed he was a man of faith, a man of God. But now, I saw him for who he truly was, a man who had taken what he wanted and was now searching for a way to cover it up. I felt numb, lost, and broken. I had given everything to this life. I had made a vow, devoted myself to purity, to faith. And now, I was pregnant. A Reverend sister, pregnant. And I had no idea what to do. I wanted to believe that Damien would stand by me. Despite everything, despite the wrongness of our actions, I needed to believe that there had been something real between us. That he had cared for me, not just for his own desires, but for me. But as the days passed, his behavior began to change. At first, it was subtle. His visits became less frequent. The warmth in his voice when he spoke to me was replaced with something colder, distant. When our eyes met across the chapel, he looked away faster than before. I tried to convince myself it was just his own way of dealing with the situation. He was scared, just like I was. But as the weeks passed, I could no longer ignore what was happening. He was pulling away. And then, one evening, I confronted him. We met in the church rectory, a place that had once felt sacred but now felt suffocating. I stood before him, my hands shaking as I searched his face for the man I had once trusted. "What are we going to do, Damien?" I whispered. "I can't hide this forever." He sighed heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "Maria, we must keep this quiet." His words hit me like a slap. "Keep this quiet." I stared at him, my stomach twisting with a nausea that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. "This isn't something we can just hide," I said, my voice breaking. "A child is not a secret, Damien. This is real." His jaw clenched, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes, not fear, but calculation. "We have to think about the consequences," he said, his voice measured, careful. "If this gets out, our lives will be destroyed." Our lives? No. It was his life he was thinking about. His reputation. His position. His power. Still, I held on to a shred of hope. "I don't care about my reputation," I admitted. "I will take responsibility for my actions. But I need to know where you stand. Are you going to help me raise this child, or—" I stopped when I saw the hesitation in his eyes. That was the moment I knew. He had already made his decision. His next words shattered me. "There's only one way to fix this," he said. His voice was too calm, too firm. I swallowed, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" His gaze hardened. "An abortion, Maria. It's the only way." My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, the world went completely silent. The candles in the room flickered, the walls seemed to close in, and all I could hear was the echo of his words in my mind. Abortion. The word felt like a curse. The man who had convinced me to break my vows, the man who had whispered devotion and love in the shadows, was now asking me to erase the proof of what we had done. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I can't." His eyes darkened. "Maria, be reasonable. If anyone finds out—" "I don't care," I snapped, my voice rising. "This is a life, Damien. A child. Our child." His lips pressed into a thin line. "And what do you expect me to do? Leave everything behind? Ruin my entire life for a mistake?" Mistake. The word cut through me like a blade. A mistake. That was all this was to him. Tears burned my eyes as I took a shaky step back. "So that's how you see it?" I whispered. "A mistake." His silence was the only answer I needed. I had always known that Damien was powerful, charming, persuasive. But I had never seen him like this before. The control, the manipulation. It was all there, laid bare before me. "You don't understand, Maria," he said, his voice growing more desperate. "If this gets out, we're finished. Do you know what they'll do to me?" I let out a hollow laugh, one filled with pain. "This isn't just about you." His nostrils flared, frustration evident in every line of his face. "I have worked too hard to throw everything away for a moment of weakness," he snapped. "A moment of weakness?" I stared at him, my body going cold. "I trusted you," I said softly. "I thought you cared about me." His expression faltered for a split second before his mask returned. "Of course, I care about you, Maria. But we need to be smart about this." "Smart?" My voice cracked. "You want me to kill my own child just to protect your reputation? And you call that smart?" His jaw clenched. "If you don't, everything will fall apart." I took a deep breath, wiping away the tears that streamed down my face. And then, I said the words that changed everything. I'm keeping the baby. The room fell into silence. Damien's expression darkened, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. That would be a mistake, he warned. I straightened my shoulders. No. The mistake was trusting you. I realized how much power he had over me. I had seen him command entire congregations, turn crowds into loyal followers with just his words. And now, he was turning his persuasion against me. Would he abandon me? Or worse, would he expose me first to save himself? My blood turned to ice at the thought. If he told the church before I had a chance to explain, I would be the one blamed. I would be cast out in disgrace, while he would spin the story however he wanted. And I knew what he was capable of. Fear gripped me. Would he do it? Would he turn against me completely? I had to get out. I had to leave before he destroyed me. I had a choice to make. I could leave quietly, slip away into the unknown, carrying my secret with me forever. Or I could confess. Confess the truth. Confess my sin. Confess what had been done to me not just by Father Damien, but by my own blindness, my own weakness. I had spent weeks living in fear, terrified of what would happen if the truth came out. But now, standing at the edge of this decision, I realized something. The fear wasn't of the consequences. It was of being seen. For so long, I had lived in secrecy, in shame. But now, I was done hiding. I refused to carry this weight alone any longer. With trembling hands, I made my way to Mother Superior's office. She sat behind her desk, her aged face calm yet unreadable. "Sit," she said simply. I obeyed, my fingers twisting in my lap. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint. "I have something to tell you," I whispered, my voice barely holding together. She remained silent, waiting. I took a deep breath. And then, I told her everything. I expected outrage, disgust, a storm of anger. Instead, there was only silence. A silence so heavy, so suffocating, it felt like it was crushing me. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "Are you certain?" I looked down at my stomach, my hand resting gently over the child growing inside me. The undeniable proof of my sin. "Yes," I said firmly. "I am pregnant with Father Damien's child." She inhaled sharply, then closed her eyes as if she were in silent prayer. "This is a disgrace." Tears burned in my eyes, but I held my head high. "I know. But I will not hide anymore." The moment the news broke, the convent was in chaos. Whispers filled the hallways. Shock and judgment tainted every glance in my direction. I had known this would happen, but I wasn't prepared for how alone it made me feel. Some of the nuns looked at me with pity, others with disgust. And then there were those who looked at me with something else, fear. Fear that if someone like me, someone so devoted, could fall, then maybe none of them were truly safe from sin. But the real explosion happened when the church confronted Father Damien. At first, he denied everything. He stood before the elders of the church, his face a perfect mask of calm. "She is lying," he said. "She is trying to destroy me." I sat in the corner of the room, my body trembling as I watched him lie so effortlessly. But the evidence was undeniable. I was carrying his child. And in the end, the church did not tolerate disgrace. The decision was swift. Father Damien was stripped of his position. He was removed from the church in disgrace, his reputation shattered. I thought I would feel relief. But as I watched him walk out for the last time, I felt nothing. No victory. No closure. Just emptiness. Once the scandal had reached its peak, the church turned its attention to me. There was no room for a pregnant Reverend sister within the convent. I had broken my vows. I had brought shame upon the sacred grounds. And so, just like Damien, I was cast out. But unlike him, I was not leaving in disgrace. I walked out with nothing except the life growing inside me. I should have been devastated. I had lost everything, my position, my home, my purpose. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something else. Freedom. No more hiding. No more shame. I had made my choice. I chose life. I chose my child. And that was something no one could take from me. Months passed. I built a new life, though it was not easy. The outside world was unkind to a woman like me, a former nun, unmarried, carrying a child born from scandal. There were moments of doubt. Moments when I wondered if I had made the wrong decision. But every time I felt my baby move inside me, I knew this child was never a mistake. Then, one evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, my phone rang. I hesitated before answering. The voice on the other end made my breath catch. Damien. I had not heard from him since the day he was thrown out of the church. "What do you want?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. There was a pause. "And then I want to see my child." The request shook me to my core. Had he changed? Had he reflected on his actions and come to terms with what he had done? Or was this just another manipulation? Another attempt to control what he had once abandoned? I didn't know the answer. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, my hand resting over my growing belly. Could redemption come from betrayal? Could a man like Damien truly seek forgiveness? Would I let him back into my life? Would I let him into my child's life? The line remained silent, both of us waiting for an answer neither of us was prepared for. And in that moment, as the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressed down on me, I realized. This was no longer just my decision to make.